Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video, looking at the extra nuggets concerning the war in Ukraine and how it can help you and I understand the whole context of this war and the war in itself. Let's start today with returning to BRICS. Well, what is BRICS? BRICS is, I talked you through BRICS the other day. This agreement, this group of China, well, let's go through the letters: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. This is this group that formed in 2001, but there's a bit of an asymmetry in the group. And I talked to you about how China is by far and away the big brother. With a huge GDP compared to the other nations. India, a very distant second, and closely followed by Russia and Brazil, who are pretty much like for like in terms of GDP, and South Africa at the bottom. Well, what do we have to talk about today? A couple of things have happened. Well, actually, let's go back to the January the 10th and the 9th, 10th. Around that time, a sanctioned Russian ship moved cargo under the cover of darkness at a port in South Africa. So it turned off its transponder, and the local government won't say what was being unloaded. It took, I think, 3 nights for it to be unloaded, and then when it was taken away, it was taken away with armed escort. Incredibly dodgy, clandestine, something going on there. Almost certainly military cargo of some sort, possibly to help with, stuff going on in Mozambique or maybe somewhere else, whatever. This shows that there is definitely something going on between Russia and South Africa. So, as it says here, the Lady Yard's been accused of moving weapons and arms for Russia. Yeah, that's what's going to have been happening. Well, forward wind a little bit, and we have South Africa is on the side of the vile colonial power, says Michael McKay in some kind of ironic twist. Russia. The South African government agrees with the apartheid policies of the Russian colonizers, where its people are great Russians, quote, great Russians, and Ukrainians are little Russians. Okay, so that's the approach of Russia. South Africa seems to be kind of sanctioning that approach, to use a term. What has happened, and this is from the Globe and Mail, South Africa to side with Russia on a push for redesigned global order. Goodness me. So it looks like South Africa are really picking their, I don't know, picking their allies here. Yeah, and they are picking Russia over and above the West. And we'll see some kind of reasoning behind that as we look at this article. So let's have a look. South Africa will join Russia in pushing for a quote, redesigned global order. Wow. I mean, that's a huge statement to make. So South Africa will join Russia in pushing for a quote, redesigned global order, in which a greater role is played by non-Western organizations such as the BRICS partnership, South Africa's foreign minister says. Naledi Pandor made the comment on Monday as she met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at the beginning of his latest tour of African capitals. So in the middle of the war, Russia's foreign minister is courting African capitals. This is a huge move, I think, for Russia, geopolitically speaking. Russia and South Africa are 2 of the 5 members of BRICS, along with China, India, and Brazil. The war in Ukraine has revitalized Moscow's campaign for new organizations to compete with Western-dominated blocs such as a Group of 7, so G7. There is growing talk that BRICS could expand within the next year to include possible new entrants such as Nigeria, Egypt, Venezuela, Iran, Argentina, or Saudi Arabia. Earlier this month, Mrs. Pandor said there was, quote, very, very significant demand for membership of BRICS. A decision on expansion is likely to be made this year during South Africa's term as chair of the group, she said. The BRICS countries are already discussing the possibility of challenging the global dominance of the US dollar by using other currencies in their trading relations, Ms. Pandor said. So this is really interesting. That there is a challenge. That people want some alternative vision of what the world might look like, and they see the US as this overriding power that sits atop the global pyramid, if you like, and it's the US dollar that is the international currency for trade, so on and so forth. And they want just something different to that. It doesn't seem to matter whether that system works at all, I guess. And what would working look like? But I wonder whether this is just someone else wanting to be at the top, and the Russia-China axis uh, are going to want to be those top dogs. South Africa are happy to go along with that if it's for the benefit of themselves. Quote from her: "The current global geopolitical tensions clearly signal the need to create institutional mechanisms that will have the stature, form, and global trust to promote global peace and security," she said. That is a really problematic statement. She just, sorry, I should have said before that, she does say BRICS should play a proactive role in emerging processes to ensure it is part of a redesigned global order. So that's where that redesigned global order comes from. But the current global geopolitical tensions clearly signal the need to create institutional mechanisms that will have the stature, form, and global trust to promote global peace and security. You are taking on board Russia in that global geopolitical system, that institutional mechanism to create stature, form, and trust, and promotes peace and security. You have Russia in that, and they are the aggressors who invaded a sovereign nation for imperialistic gain. I just this is thoroughly problematic. Just, oh dear. Stephen Gruzd, head of the Russia-Africa Research Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, said the BRICS group has, quote, found a new lease of life as a result of the Ukraine conflict. He goes on to say there's a strong affinity in the group that the world should not have one superpower, and that one superpower should not be the US. There are two different things going on there. You can argue that, yeah, one superpower is some kind of, I don't know, maybe an economic tyranny, you might see it as, but it's not necessarily that. But maybe in terms of competition, that there's a kind of monopoly going on there that free marketeers might not like, but I don't think that's really what's going on here. There must be a multipolarity. There must be other centers of power. And again, I can understand that, but the alternative center of power involving Russia is hugely challenging for anyone that wants, well, I'd say global peace and security to be at the center of what they're planning there. So there are rank contradictions going on, I think, here. I think BRICS is reinventing itself, and it's finding traction, and indeed it's setting itself up as a kind of rival to the G7. So this is like Russia is now pushing in places like Africa. I mean, this is a really interesting article to go on and read the whole of. It is, as it says here, it's thumbing its nose at the West. This is really sticking the middle finger, or as we say in the UK, sticking two fingers up at the West and saying, look, we can do this ourselves. Thank you very much. Well, I talked to you the other day, not only about South Africa, I talked to you mainly about Brazil and whether Lula would be on the side of BRICS or would look to the West. Well, a really interesting development is, I was watching Newsnight in the UK last night, and there was a section on Argentina and Brazil. So both leaders have got together. They're they're left-wing leaders, and so they're sort of hanging out together to kind of clap themselves on the back because there's a return to kind of left-wing leadership in some of these countries in South America. But rather than turn towards BRICS, and this is fascinating, I wonder what's going on here. Brazil and Argentina are possibly going to form a currency of their own. So they don't do international trade in US dollars, but will be doing it in a new kind of bilateral currency. Argentina and Brazil are in early talks to create a common currency as part of a coordinated bid to reduce reliance on the US dollar. Analysts are highly skeptical. Of course, US news agency is probably going to say this, dismissing the proposal as pie in the sky. Quote, it's hard to believe Argentina and Brazil would actually move in this direction given the discrepancies in the two economies at the present stage. Yeah, so inflation is rampant in Argentina, not so much in Brazil. So the two economies are in different places, and that could make that single currency problematic, but in principle could well be workable. Anyway, this is again looking to provide an alternative to the US dollar, to the power center that is the US, but not going towards BRICS. And I find that quite a poignant move there. And I don't know whether that's purposeful, instead of saying to BRICS and getting together with South Africa and Russia at this perfectly opportune moment to say, hey, we'll have a part of this. Let's get together and work even more closely. Brazil seems to be saying, yeah, not so much. Not so much about Russia and China. Let's keep it together ourselves in South America. But again, the US might not like this in the same way they don't like BRICS. But you could argue that, yeah, but at least Brazil and Argentina aren't going the BRICS direction. Argentina aren't knocking on the door of BRICS and asking to join BRICS. So, well, there's some really interesting political positioning going on at the moment, globally speaking. Question might be, what's Russia's vision of the future? And of course, Russia's vision of the future is going to include Russia as a status quo as it is, of them winning the war against Ukraine. But that's highly unlikely. I don't see this going any other way than Russia eventually losing in some way, and there being at least a leader change. So the question for me that's interesting is, what will happen after Russia lose this war, as I think they will. So who would replace Putin? What kind of regime would you see? Would it be more of the same? Would it be worse? There's some arguments to say actually some of the people that could be lined up to replace him might be even more nationalistic and worse. So I don't know. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a flavour of what's happening around the world. That Russia are courting a lot of places, and that's not even to talk about the Balkans, where there's a lot of information warfare going on, particularly around Serbia, Kosovo. They are working really hard. There's a really interesting segment on Ukraine, the latest. I want to play you a couple of segments from that. Well, I'll probably have to do that tomorrow now. Fascinating discussion on lots of different things. One of the things is they've got somebody talking about propaganda and information warfare and a kind of fifth generation warfare going on. And there was talk about how the West and US and allies really need to take the fight of messaging to the Russian population. The Russia are spending so much time and effort in flooding the information space with their narrative, with going around the world, places like, yes, there might not be RT in Europe, Russia Today spreading misinformation because they've been banned, but they're working in Venezuela, they're working in Africa, they're working in Asia. The Russian don't think that Russia don't have purchase around the world. They do. And there are many countries where their narrative falls on fertile ground. And the US and allies need to fight back, and it's taking the messaging back. So that it's just like conventional warfare, like first, second, third, fourth generation warfare, is that if you go on the attack, Russia has to defend and then put resources not so much into their offensive but into their defensive stance. So if you're taking the messaging to Russia, and you can talk about how that might look, then Russia will have to react to that and won't be able to do so much on the offensive front. We'll have to concentrate more on fighting defensively. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidebar. One of the pro-Russian voices on my thread saying, "Well, why haven't you talked about the Terminator? Why haven't you talked about the Terminator video?" And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, mate." And then because he expects that I've seen everything in the world. I do see a lot, but not everything. Anyway, he's pointing me towards this. Is interesting. So, what is a Terminator? I talked about this right at the beginning of my videos, I think. So, this is sort of much vaunted sort of tank. I say sort of tank. It's built on a T-72 chassis, but it's like an armored fighting vehicle, just almost a tank support, called the Terminator. It's got auto cannons. You can put rockets on top. Coaxial machine gun, which means it follows a turret. These sort of different setups that you can have on top. And examples of an upgraded version of this were called the Terminator, were reported on the 18th of May 2022 to be in use in the Russian military in the Battle of Severodonetsk in Ukraine. And so this video's now come out, and my first reaction is, this isn't now. Like, this is not now. There's no snow. This isn't winter. That looks like this has come from May last year in Severodonetsk. but it's now just surfacing some drone footage of not just the Terminator, but some tanks working. Let's have a look at this. I don't know. It hasn't got any sound, this video, anyway. So you've got some tanks doing their stuff. You've got, I'll expand it actually. You got the Terminator doing stuff. So here's the auto cannons on top, absolutely mincing these trees and almost forming a path. Then I think the next thing, I think that's a tank firing at something there. I think there's a IFV or some kind of vehicle down there that's being precision hit by the tank. So not so much anything about the Terminator there. And then there's just more. So I think that's definitely hit something. We do see a destroyed vehicle in a second. Here, I mean, this is the power of those auto cannons. Um, quite what it's doing is it's suppressive fire, or is it just someone letting rip um, and taking out some trees? But I'm fairly sure this is not winter. I mean, it could be. Oh, is that snow? That might be. Don't know. Uh, and yeah, so you can see how far those autocannons tracer rounds go, and there's a bit of stuff. It's not quite sure what's happening there, and it goes on to show some sort of dead bodies and whatnot. You get to see some destroyed tanks beforehand. Um, Someone running from a tank, and there you go. So that's the Terminator. So I don't know what he wants me to say about that. It's a machine that's destroyed a bunch of trees. I'm sure it's effective if used well. I'm sure it's a decent enough piece of kit if used. I think would they develop to be used more in urban kind of warfare to take the sort of weaponry it's got on there is quite useful for, you can imagine in Mariinka and places like that, sort of taking out those urban firing positions and whatnot. Anyway, just I thought I'd show you some footage of some Russian equipment there. Now let's move on to something that I think really shows the difference between the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces, although there's corruption in the Ukrainian forces and in the government, and that's something that's reared its ugly head this week, and Zelensky and his government are trying to stamp out and being very robust on, as they have to be. But here we've had the head of Ukraine's armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, inheriting $1 million from a Ukrainian American, Gregory Stepanets. Zaluzhny donated this money to the Ukrainian military. Wow. I mean, this guy, I have a feeling, will go down in the history books anyway, irrespective of this move. But that just shows you, he's not buying a super yacht or putting his money towards that or whatever. He's, you know, he's wears his heart on his sleeve, it appears. I mean, that's a really big move that he's made there, and I congratulate him for that. I mean, yeah, it just sets a really good tone, and I think that's responsible and shows maybe that this guy has a decent bit of integrity. But he's always one that when he speaks, the interview I read with him that I shared with you a lot of recently with the Economist, I just got good vibes from that whole interview that this guy is one of the good ones. But you'd be interested to see what you think. Mark Hartling, for those, so this is a bit of a thread here. For those saying, don't doubt Ukraine's soldiers, they've proven themselves and can handle any tank they're given, I'd say three things. So this is all in light of Leopards, Abrams, Challenger 2s. I've never doubted Ukrainian tankers to learn how to fire and drive the Abrams. I've worked with the Ukraine's army. I know them. They're good. It isn't learning the tank I'm concerned about. Can they quickly learn the capability of the Abrams and Leopard 2, the way it is designed to operate? That's training with other tanks, infantry, scouts, drones, artillery, engineers, intel, all more than crew training. When a tank or small critical parts in a tank break, which they do, and when no small and large replacement parts need replacing, and when it requires daily, weekly, monthly echelon maintenance, will Ukraine have also trained those who do these things? After the tank crews, sections, companies, battalions master the gunnery skills, the maneuver and the maintenance, will there also be echelons of support that will flow the needed parts, FUPs, ammo, fuel, road wheels, torsion bars, etc., to the front lines? The reason I ask these things is because I've seen how real armored operations work, and I know how American soldiers and units train continuously to get all these things synchronized, and it requires teamwork outside the tank units too. Those saying just give them the damn tanks have likely never seen the choreography to making this work on the battlefield. All those saying Ukraine has already incorporated other things, they can do this too. I'd only say I've seen the US units at our training centers and in combat get just a few things wrong and it causes disaster and failure. Lethal tanks turn into pillboxes that don't move or shoot. To make all this worse, it takes training, maintenance, supply, and a team beyond just the tankers to get this right on the battlefield. I'm ecstatic Germany seems to have made a decision to provide Leopards, and it appears the US may provide some Abrams for the long term. But like I said, it would take months to get Patriots to the battlefield. It looks like 3 months. Getting these transfers will take time and effort. I'll guess Leopards will be ready for the fight by maybe March. Abrams likely all are a follow-on. I'll be listening to the POTUS speech tomorrow. That's the President of the United States. But I suspect they are 8 months plus out. But this lightning speed to deliver and prepare force not trained on these vehicles. All of this is very different from delivering and training individual soldiers on Javelin and Stingers, the crews on MRAPs, Humvees, HIMARS, and Bradleys. Tanks, like aircraft, are a whole different ball game. Combined arms conventional operations with lethal heavy armor isn't a video game. You can't drop technologically advanced equipment onto the battlefield expecting soldiers who do not know it will be able to use it, maintain it, or integrate it into a combined arms team. And for everyone also saying the West should have given them all this months ago, I'd say maybe, but an army and country fighting for its life had a few other things on their mind, and we hadn't reached this part of the fight just yet. It's war, it's hard to predict. Let me end where I started. Ukraine's army has proven itself, they've adapted, and that's key to winning. Ukrainian soldiers are terrific, and I know many of them. But Russia's failure has also contributed to Ukraine getting this far. Very good point, that. Tanks will make a difference, but there'll be hiccups. So, yeah, these things take time and effort and an awful lot of sorting out. Now, on to something very different. Questioning of two reportedly mobilized Russians who shot civilians while in Ukraine. The man and his comrades attempted rape. Someone stood up for the woman. So this is in occupied Ukraine, I would gather. And as a result, drunken Russians tied them up and executed the civilians. Questioning done by Russian military police. So actually, it seems like the Russian military police are holding these guys to account. They've done very much wrong here. I unfortunately there's no translation that I have, but yeah, that is just another example of a war crime actually caught this time by Russian military police. So yeah, just in case you're denying as a pro-Russian that war crimes are happening, so a massive scale of war crime is indeed happening. So on to the last couple of things, because I have to split today's extra again into two parts. I do apologise, just due to other commitments. Here we talk a lot about Gepards being really useful for taking out drones and other aerial targets. They are a bit old school, autocannons on top of a tracked chassis. But basically not crazy high tech, useful bit of radar associated with that. Well, here we have a couple of examples of other bits of kit that are also being used. Ukrainian forces continue to use older and improvised systems to counter slower aerial threats like drones. Seen below, a ZPU-1 12.7mm anti-aircraft gun at a training range. So here... So a couple of them firing off there with their sort of trace around so you can see where they're firing, and other people can see as well. Aim for the same target possibly. And then we have Ukrainian ZIL-131 mounted ZU-23 to 23mm anti-aircraft autocannons. And here we go. It's always annoying when they put music on, because you kind of want to hear what these sound like to give you a sense of being there and how loud they are. This guy is sort of loading the ammo boxes on himself and then getting back on and firing away. That is, or not, as the case may be. There we go. And yeah, pretty bright flashes there, but they are, yeah, that's. I wonder how quickly an entire box of that ammo is expended. Looks to be pretty darned quickly. Okay, and the last thing here is I've talked a number of times about the threat of loitering munitions for the Russians. Well, threat for the Ukrainians that the Russians use. So their Lancet loitering drones have been a real thorn in the side, I think, of the Ukrainians for some time. Well, you're starting to see an awful lot more FPV, first person view, one-way attack drones. Some people call these kamikaze drones. Other people have an issue with that, sort of degrading what kamikaze actually means, in terms of, you know, a real person sacrificing themselves. But yeah, these one-way loitering drones are, yeah, you're seeing them more and more for the Ukrainians. I think some of them are improvised, or a lot of them appear to be improvised ones, rather than created like Switchblade. I've seen some Switchblade footage, but not a lot as I was expecting, given that they have received a whole bunch of them. Here. Oh, hello. Pulls the screen off the table there. Never a good thing. So yeah, it looks like there's some kind of BMP there that it hits. But as it gets closer and closer, you lose the feed. So you would assume that was hit. I better turn it off because it's still going. And then here we've got one that definitely looks to be more, well, it's definitely successful. Or at least it hits the target for sure. The deed of a gloomy unknown Ukrainian genius. Yeah, I'm not sure gloomy is the right word there. Drone loitering munition with PG-7 destroyed Russian forces BMP-1. Here it is. Let's go and have a look at a little bit more closely at this. And that target is a moving target as well, which is a bit more difficult. It hits it at the front side, around the tracks. I would assume it'll certainly disable that. I don't think you'd get anything more than that. Depends how big the explosive warhead or device it has on board is. Anyway, there you go. Thank you. That's the first part of today's Ukraine War update extra video. There's just so much content coming out. I had to split it into two. Got to speak about a few other things. So I'll release this one, and maybe later tonight, if I get a chance, put out the other. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. All the ways you can support the channel are in the description below. Toodle pips. I'll speak to you later.